It's not often a former Secretary of State gets publicly criticized by a current one, but that happened recently to John Kerry, who was rebuked by both Mike Pompeo and Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley for recently meeting several times with the Iranian foreign minister.
What Secretary Kerry has done is unseemly and unprecedented. This is a former Secretary of State engaged with the world's largest state sponsor of terror.
What Secretary Kerry did was not only disrespectful, it was hurtful to America.
I just sat down to discuss this and more with the former Senator and Secretary of State at the Free Library of Philadelphia. Kerry just released a memoir. It's titled Every Day is Extra, tracing his path from diplomat's son to Vietnam veteran, 5-term senator, 2004 Democratic presidential nominee, and Secretary of State. Mr. Secretary, I've been reading your book while watching the Kavanaugh process play itself out. I think you wrote something that was prescient. You said, "I wondered why some of my colleagues even wanted to be there if they couldn't vote the way their hearts and minds told them." Is that what we witnessed in the Friday vote? Is that what we're about to witness on Saturday?
Well, it's possible. I don't know. I'm not inside the minds of some of those folks, but it happens too often in the Senate these days that people are drilled into a corner by the ideological orthodoxy that is pushed around the Senate these days. And people are terrified by threats of being primaried by one wing of the party or another. I think it's unfortunate. It's not totally new, but the intensity of it these days is something very different and very dangerous.
It's quite different, though, than the Senate in which you served. It looks like one individual, Joe Manchin, is voting with the other party. Nobody on either side, no independents.
This is going to cost the Senate and it's going to cost the country. It has not been a process that most people on either side, everybody feels offended. And I think the principals, Dr. Ford and Judge Kavanaugh, have both been treated in a way that raises questions about the process. Mistakes have been made.
You're no longer Secretary of State, yet you're crossing swords with this president, with the UN ambassador, with the current Secretary of State. They don't want you involved. In your view,
I'm not involved. I'm speaking out as a citizen in America. If they don't want me to speak out, that's a different issue. But I'm telling you, I have not met with any Iranians since the president pulled out of the agreement, period. And I think it's important for people to focus on the real issues here, which are, is this the best policy for the United States to be pulling out of an agreement which we helped create, which was being kept, and by pulling out, I think loses the best option of all, which would have been to use staying in for some period of time as leverage to get the Europeans, the Chinese, and the Russians to work with us to hold Iran accountable on the missiles, to do a better job on Yemen, to work on the issue of Hezbollah, which we don't like them supporting, which is a terrorist organization. So we could have leveraged better outcomes, I think. But by just pulling out and angering everybody, I don't think it serves the best interests of our country. And I am free to speak my mind with respect to that.
I get the impression you'll not stop doing so.
Stop being an American citizen? No.
You write in the book about your days, your early days as a prosecutor. Some might not remember that John Kerry began his career in Massachusetts as a prosecutor.
Yeah. I loved it. It was one of the best jobs I ever had. A great job.
Robert Mueller, a former classmate. You know where this question is going. I know you don't know what he has in terms of evidence, but you're a smart guy. From the outside looking in with your trained prosecutorial eye, do you think that there's a case to be made for conspiracy/collusion?
Well, I think, literally without knowing what Bob Mueller has or what they're doing at this point in time, the fact that they have a meeting in the Trump Tower and emails are exchanged which express their love of receiving from Russians the materials calculated to hurt the other candidate they're running against is sort of pretty self-evident, prima facie kind of collusion. You meet with Russians, You say, I'm excited, I love the idea of getting dirt on the other candidate from these people, and you go have a meeting. Where that goes in the larger legal sense of does it meet the standard of the law? Will all the sufficient qualifications be met? Are there more pieces of that? Is there exculpatory evidence? I don't know the answers to those questions. So I'm not suggesting what Bob Mueller should do or what the legal outcome might be. But there's no doubt in my mind that the Trump campaign was anxious to get information from anywhere, and the president publicly went out and said, I hope the Russians hack the emails or release all the emails. You know, I think that nobody's fooled by the protests that you hear today.
So many of us, final question, so many of us are consumed with the Kavanaugh nomination process and the Mueller probe. Meanwhile, the unemployment rate is at a 49-year low, 3.7% according to the jobs data that came out on Friday morning. Is that going to be the more significant issue to midterm voters?
No, I don't believe so, because I think that even as there is low unemployment figure, there's what you call underemployment. There are many, many people who are working in jobs that are not as high paying as the jobs they had before. And the salaries of many people who even are in the jobs they are before are not going up sufficiently to meet the increases of costs and to empower people to be able to live the fullness of their aspirations in the American dream. And I think that that's a problem. The tax bill really did enormous good for the big corporations, for the people who could repatriate money from overseas, for the stock market, for billionaires. They're doing very well. The upper echelon of America is doing extremely well right now. But people who are struggling in the middle and in the lower ends are still struggling to get ahead, and they're still feeling the pain of some of the upset of what happened in 2008. So I think that, I don't think people are focused on that. I think they feel there's a certain chaos in our governance today. I think people feel that Washington is not getting the job done still. And there are an enormous number of really interesting candidates, Republican and Democrat alike. Many of them veterans of Afghanistan or Iraq, or people who are getting into politics for the first time from business or elsewhere in professional lives, who know that the system is broken and they want to try to fix it. And I think this midterm election is one of the most important course correction elections we've had in a long, long time in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you.